Across much of North America, an ungulate almost wiped out a century ago can be found thriving in large numbers across suburbia. The white-tailed deer is perhaps the most adaptable large animal on the planet. With their ability to live in a diversity of habitats and eat a number of different plant species, deer populations have exploded over the course of the 20th and 21st centuries. Their vast numbers have allowed many people to enjoy having deer around, whether as to hunt them as a more sustainable meal than beef, or to enjoy the welcoming sight of deer munching on leaves of shrubs where their backyards meet the woods. Due to their success, deer have become overpopulated due to the extirpation of large carnivores across most of their range, and the changing landscape through logging practices has created the ideal habitat for deer. This leads to deer coming to more conflict with people, from an increase in motor vehicle accidents to deer eating agricultural crops. To manage deer populations, deer hunting seasons have been put into place to keep their numbers in check. Now throughout most of the deer's range, humans are the apex predator. This has led to deer hunting becoming an industry worth billions of dollars, funding scientific studies to help better understand the lives of deer. In this film, you'll get to learn the natural history of this familiar yet elusive ungulate that lives so close to us. A secretive and familiar animal that hides among the thick cover of the forest edge, watching us while we play in our backyards. The white-tailed deer is the smallest member of the deer family called Cervidae in North America. This species of deer have lean bodies, long legs that have two big weight-bearing toes followed by two smaller dew claws on each foot. Their necks are quite slender and have sculpted heads with an elongated snout and black nose. White-tailed deer are sexually dimorphic, meaning the sexes are morphologically distinct. Male deer, called bucks, are double the size, averaging 3 to 3.3 feet tall at the shoulder, 5.6 to 7 feet in length, and weigh 100 to 250 pounds. Bucks also adorn bony protrusions on top of their heads called antlers, which they regrow every year. Antlers are used in defense against aggressors, dominance battles with other bucks, and an ornament used to symbolize health and genetic potential. Female deer, called does, are smaller than bucks at 2.5 to 3 feet tall at the shoulder, 5.6 to 7 feet in length, and average 80 to 130 pounds. Unlike bucks, does do not have antlers. Since deer can be found across much of North America, their body size can vary depending on the habitat and geographical distribution in which they are found. Deer in northern portions of their range tend to be larger than their conspecifics further south. This is a biological phenomenon known as Bergmann's rule, which allows deer further north to have a larger body mass to retain more body heat during winter. The white-tailed deer gets its name from the white fur under its tail, while the top side is some variation of brown. The deer's tail is also the longest tail of any North American deer species, in which it can raise its tail so high that it's able to arc forward over the deer's back. White-tailed deer have two annual fur coats which vary in color depending on the time of year. The first set, being the summer coat, is a bright russet red. This coat is highly reflective, bouncing off the sun's rays, keeping the deer cool. As mid-August approaches, bucks start to lose their summer coats, while does lose theirs around mid-September due to the physical demands of nursing fawns. This leads to the growth of their winter coats, which can vary from dark brown to deep shades of gray. There are two sections of the deer's winter coat. Long guard hairs keep the deer dry from cold rain and snow, while the dense woolly undercoat insulates the deer, keeping them warm. Their fur coat can withstand most sub-zero temperatures depending on the strength of the winds and the overall body condition of the deer. Despite being common today, the white-tailed deer population faced a major decline after European colonization of North America. This was because Europeans began to overhunt deer, believing they were a never-ending resource. This led to a high demand for deer meat and hides, which pushed white-tailed deer closer to extinction. In the United States during the early 20th century, legal protections were established as fewer deer were being seen across the landscape. Government officials began instating regulated hunting seasons where people could hunt deer at certain times of the year. With the installment of the limited hunting seasons, deer populations were able to bounce back, along with the extirpation of large carnivores like wolves and mountain lions, the increase of early successional habitat from human development, and climate change. The white-tailed deer has reclaimed itself as the most common large mammal species in North America. It is believed deer have become so common that their overall population is larger than it was during precolonial times. White-tailed deer can be found across most of the North American continent and even stretch into portions of North and South America. A major part of their success is their ability to thrive in a number of different habitats, including temperate deciduous forests, meadows, brushlands, agricultural fields, and even suburban landscapes. Most often, deer are found in areas where forests meet the edges of a meadow or field. This is known as edge habitat, which provides abundant vegetation for the deer to use as cover to hide along with food to eat. White-tailed deer live in areas called home ranges, which are quite small compared to home ranges or territories of other large mammals. The average home range is between 1 to 4 square miles. The overall size of a home range can vary depending on the sex of the deer, the habitat quality, and the time of year. Bucks typically have larger home ranges than does, most notably during the rut when they are in pursuit for breeding does. Like most large ungulates, white-tailed deer are social animals, but their social structure is quite unique since they tend to live in small herds, being forest-dwelling animals where they can rely on thick cover to hide from predators. Yet, having more than one set of eyes provides the deer more comfort when keeping an eye out for predators, hence why they are not solitary. Deer generally live in one of two types of herds, a maternal herd or a bachelor herd. Maternal herds consist of an eldest doe, her adult female offspring, and their fawns. Occasionally, unrelated does will join these groups, especially when a young doe has left her maternal herd. On average, does leave their maternal herd at around 3 years old. The second group, known as bachelor herds, only consists of bucks. The size of a bachelor herd varies depending on the deer density of an area. Bucks join bachelor herds as yearlings and can often be part of the same group for several years. Bachelor herds will temporarily break up a few months before the rut as bucks become less tolerant of each other. In parts of the white-tailed deer's range with severe winters, deer can be found living in large herds consisting of bucks, does, and fawns. This is a result of the seasonal changes in habitat rather than a desire to herd together in large numbers. Since resources become more sparse in winter, deer will congregate where the most resources are found, hence why large herds of deer are seen in winter. Being social animals, white-tailed deer have a number of ways in which they communicate to each other. Deer heavily rely on various forms of body language to exhibit how they feel. Aggression will look similar between the sexes with some slight variances. When a buck is in an aggressive mood, he will position his head with his chin tucked in, ears pulled back, antlers tilted in the direction of the perceived threat, tail curled towards the rump, and tail and body hairs flared outward to make himself appear larger than he actually is. While doing this, he will also slowly walk in a stiff-legged gait. An aggressive doe will exhibit much of the same body language of a buck, from pulling her ears back, staring at the threat, and performing the slow walk behaviors like bucks do. The only difference is does lack antlers and must rely on their front hooves to deter a threat or adversary. If a doe's body language does not come across as intimidating, the doe will then lunge forward at her adversary with her front hooves. A fearful deer will react differently depending on how immediate a threat is. A deer that identifies a threat will immediately run, waving its tail upward. Deer that are suspicious don't often run immediately and will hold their heads high and ears pointed forward, looking directly at or in the suspected direction of a threat. The deer will then proceed to stomp its hoof as the deer becomes more nervous. This is suspected to alert other deer in the herd of a potential threat, or it's thought the foot stomp is directed at the predator to make them give away their position. This is often accompanied by a loud snort with their heads bobbing and tail waving. A relaxed deer will rotate its ears while raising and lowering its head, with its neck not fully upright while swishing its tail back and forth. They are not fixating towards a particular direction, but casually listening for any potential threats that may be coming their way. While deer do move their ears around to exhibit how they are feeling, they are also using them to listen out for danger. Hearing is one of the deer's most important senses, as the forest is filled with various sounds and a deer needs to determine whether a sound is a threat or not. The ears of a deer are quite large, which allow them to detect even the slightest sounds around them. To determine where a particular sound is coming from, deer can rotate their ears to pinpoint the direction of a sound. This allows the deer to communicate to other deer that they hear a threat and can look in the direction of the perceived threat. A lot of times, deer are using their ears to listen to vocalizations being made by other deer. Surprisingly, deer are quite vocal animals and produce a number of different vocalizations to communicate. Grunts are one of the most common vocalizations and can mean a number of different things depending on the intensity of a grunt. Soft grunts are used by does to strengthen social bonds between fawns and herd members. Loud and deep grunts are often produced by bucks to intimidate rival bucks and to attract does. Bleats are used when a fawn or adult deer is in distress, expressing contentment with herd mates, or when a doe is in estrus. Snorts are a common sound deer use when sensing danger. If a deer feels unsafe, they will often flee the scene while snorting, which alerts other deer of potential danger. The most recognizable buck vocalization is called the snort wheeze. This call is made when a mature buck is asserting dominance to other deer in the area who is the top buck. This vocalization is several rapid snorts followed by a drawn-out blowing sound or wheeze, hence the name. Even though white-tailed deer utilize vocal communication quite a bit, scent is a far superior form of communication. With 297 million olfactory receptors, a deer's sense of smell is perhaps its strongest sense. Their long muzzle allows them to have a large number of olfactory receptors, giving them the ability to have a powerful sense of smell. With its sense of smell being 500 to 1,000 times stronger than that of a human's, deer can easily pick up the scent of other deer across the environment up to half a mile away. White-tailed deer have a number of scent glands across their bodies. These scent glands produce odors giving deer its own distinct scent. This allows deer to identify other deer within their home range to distinguish between herd members or even a potential rival. The scent glands of deer include the forehead, preorbital, nasal, salivary, preputial, tarsal, metatarsal, and interdigital glands. These scent glands are used to advertise a deer's presence across the landscape, whether it is intentional or not. During the rut, bucks are intentionally leaving their scent in the environment to signify their status to rival bucks and to estrus does ready to breed. Bucks leave their scent from rubbing their foreheads on trees to rubbing together their back legs while urinating. Unrelated to breeding behavior, deer also leave their scent when their feet touch the ground, even when they are chewing and eating vegetation. Wherever a deer goes, their scent is being deposited across the environment. To continue the legacy of their species, white-tailed deer breed once a year to produce fawns. Deer are polygynous, meaning that a buck mates with multiple does during the breeding season, also known as the rut. The time of year the rut occurs can vary greatly, but for most of the species range, the rut occurs in late autumn from early November to early December. Despite popular beliefs, the rut is not triggered by moon phases, but rather by photoperiod. Photoperiod is the occurrence of the amount of daylight in a given day. During autumn, the days are getting shorter, meaning it's getting darker longer in the span of a 24-hour period. Because deer breed in autumn, they are referred to as short-day breeders. As the days begin to shorten, the pineal gland in a buck's brain responds to the decreasing daylight through secretions of melatonin. This increase in melatonin begins to impact the hypothalamus and pituitary gland in the brain. The pituitary gland produces two hormones that travel through the bloodstream until they reach the testicles. This leads to the creation of semen and testosterone, which prepares the buck for a rut. This causes velvet to shed off the antlers to harden, and neck muscles to swell. These physiological changes coincide with the buck's overall demeanor becoming less tolerant of other bucks and eventually leaving their bachelor groups. During this time, bucks begin to scent mark across their home range via rubs and scrapes. The forehead glands enlarge to produce more scent, allowing bucks to rub their foreheads onto trees. Bucks also create scrapes by scraping depression into the ground with one of their front hooves, depositing scent via the interdigital gland. The buck will then proceed to squat to urinate on his tarsal glands, which he rubs together, leaving the urine deposited in the depression. A buck will most likely make a scrape under a low branch where he rubs his preorbital glands on, leaving scent. Bucks perform these behaviors to advertise themselves to does about their status, health, and that he is ready to secure a breeding opportunity. As bucks begin to scent mark across their home ranges, they are establishing their dominance among the deer woods. By scent marking, it helps decrease the amount of fighting between bucks, which decreases the chance of serious injury or death. If a younger, less dominant buck comes across the scent of a more dominant buck, he's likely to take off rather than challenge the dominant buck. Yet as the rut gets closer, bucks will occasionally spar with each other for practice, especially if they know each other from the same bachelor herd. It has been documented where dominant bucks spar with younger bucks, appearing to give them a few tips of fighting off rivals. Even though dominant bucks are often larger and stronger, they would rather intimidate their rivals than fight them. If a buck can intimidate another buck by his behavior and physical appearance, it means both bucks are able to walk away unscathed and live to fight another day. Typically, bucks within the same bachelor herds do not fight, as they already have established where they are in the hierarchy. If bucks do fight, it is usually two dominant bucks that have not encountered each other before and want to establish who is the more dominant individual. When the two bucks clash, it often becomes apparent which individual is stronger. The weaker buck will break off and run away, often with the winner tailing behind for a short distance. Fighting will increase as more does begin to enter estrus throughout the rut. Similar to bucks, the hypothalamus in the brain of a doe signals to the pituitary gland to produce hormones for a doe to start ovulating, which brings her into estrus. 48 hours before ovulation, a doe becomes very active, walking with her tail held high. As she wanders her home range, she urinates frequently, leaving pheromones in her urine that are picked up by vaginal mucus excreted from the vulva. It doesn't take long for bucks to find out that she's either in pre-estrus or in estrus due to these pheromones. A buck that comes across a doe will chase her, getting her to urinate. Once she does, he will test her urine by performing a phlegm response or lip curl to determine the receptiveness of a doe. If a buck detects that a doe is in pre-estrus, he will remain close to her, waiting for an opportunity to breed her. Any bucks that try to move in on her, the guardian buck will chase off the other bucks. When a doe is in estrus ready to be bred, a buck will approach the doe. The two deer will touch each other's noses, and the buck will proceed to rub his head and body against the doe's. The buck will then lick the doe's head and body, especially the vulva, to stimulate her to be mounted for breeding. When a doe is ready to be bred, she will be in a position called standing estrus, in which she has positioned herself to be mounted and bred by the buck. After breeding occurs, the doe will lay down with the buck, who will continue to guard her from other bucks. The buck will often lick the doe's head, and she reciprocates, strengthening their bond while they are together. Within the estrus period, a buck will breed a doe 5 to 6 times to ensure the best chance for conception. The total amount of time a buck spends with an estrus doe varies, but is usually between 24 to 48 hours while she is in pre-estrus and about 28 hours when she is in estrus. After her estrus cycle passes, the buck will remain with the doe for about 12 hours. If a doe does not conceive or wasn't bred, she will cycle again 28 days later after she was in estrus the first time. Once the rut is over, bucks shift their priorities from breeding to eating. Since bucks have been running around chasing does, they barely spend time eating and have lost about 25% of their body weight. Since winter is fast approaching after the rut, a buck will try to eat as much as they can before winter sets in. An already healthy buck in good physical condition can survive going into winter despite the weight loss. Does also have to make up for lost calories as they have been chased around by bucks. This is especially important if a doe has become pregnant, as she must put on weight to be able to survive the winter to give birth to fawns come spring. In late spring, after a gestation period of about 200 days, a doe will give birth in a secluded area in her home range away from other herd members. A doe will typically give birth to twins or triplets, but if it's her first time, will only give birth to one fawn. Once a fawn is born, the doe will immediately begin to lick her fawn, cleaning them of blood and amniotic fluid. This helps to clean the fawns off, but also is crucial to bonding the doe with her fawns. This birthing area is crucial since it allows the newborn fawns to imprint on their mothers. A fawn's legs are proportionally long for its body, which means it takes a lot of effort for them to stand up for the first time. Yet, since they are extremely vulnerable to predators, a fawn must learn to stand up quickly to have a fighting chance. It typically takes 10 to 20 minutes for a fawn to stand up and walk around. Once a fawn builds up enough strength, it will walk over towards its mother to start nursing. This is crucial to the fawn's survival, as the first bout of nursing produces a special secretion from the doe's mammary glands called colostrum. Colostrum is loaded with rich antibodies, which helps the fawn to kick-start their immune systems to fend off disease. While the fawns nurse, a doe will lick the anus of the fawn to ensure they can perform normal bowel movements. This is important for the fawns while they are nursing for the first time. Just as it is important for the fawns to get colostrum, does need to regain energy back after giving birth. To do this, a doe will eat the placenta or placentas depending on the number of fawns she has. The placenta has a lot of nutrients that allows the doe to regain her strength after giving birth. She will also eat any surrounding vegetation or dirt from the birth site to prevent the attention of predators. After a few hours, once the fawns get to nurse and the doe recovers from giving birth, the doe will lead her fawns away from the birthing site. The doe will hide the fawns in thick cover and lay down a bit further away from her fawns. This helps to ensure that her presence and scent does not attract the attention of predators, since fawns are born odorless. Along with being odorless, fawns adorn a white spotted coat with reddish-brown fur, which makes them quite cryptic on the forest floor. If a fawn hears any sound nearby, they will lay down with their ears back and curl their bodies in, forming a circle, being absolutely motionless. Fawns will often go into this position when a doe goes off to feed. When she returns to her fawns, she will make a bleat sound, alerting the fawns it is safe to come out of hiding. This routine will occur throughout the summer 3 to 4 times a day. Within the first week of life, fawns will begin to eat vegetation and continue to increase their consumption of plants. Fawns learn what plants are safe to eat by observing their mothers and nibbling on the same vegetation that she eats. Once fawns reach 3 to 4 months of age, they will be completely weaned and strictly be eating vegetation. At the 3-week mark from when a doe is given birth, she will return to her maternal herd with her fawns as they have imprinted on her. Other does within the herd may also have fawns, which will all play and interact with each other, forming a pecking order amongst the fawns. This is most notable with buck fawns, as they spend a lot of time chasing and having shoving matches with each other. This is all practice for when the buck fawns become adults and have to compete with other bucks for breeding opportunities. As summer turns into autumn, the fawns are bigger and start losing their spotted coats. They start to grow into their winter coats, appearing more like mini adult deer. The fawns will continue to stick with their mothers through autumn and winter, giving them a better chance to survive their first full year of life. When a fawn becomes a yearling, a few different outcomes occur depending on the sex of the yearling. Doe yearlings will often remain with their mother's maternal herd, while half of buck yearlings will disperse in spring, while the other half will disperse come autumn when they have the urge to breed. White-tailed deer reach sexual maturity at around 18 months of age. It is possible for doe fawns to reach sexual maturity at around 6 months in areas with adequate nutrition, which includes a diversity of plant matter. White-tailed deer are herbivores, meaning their diet consists of vegetation. Deer have been documented to eat hundreds of different plant species that are categorized into 4 groups: browse, forbs, grasses, and mass. Despite having a diversity of vegetation in which deer eat, they can be quite picky in what they eat to acquire the most nutrition possible. Deer are selective feeders that seek out to consume vegetation that is of the highest quality and readily digestible. Their anatomy is perfectly designed to be highly selective, as their long, narrow muzzles and tongues allow them to seek the most nutritious parts of a plant in thick cover. Once the deer finds vegetation it wants to eat, it strips the leaves with its long muzzle and chews the vegetation with its 32 teeth. Like most mammals, deer have 4 different sets of teeth to help aid them in processing food. The incisors or front teeth help to tear at vegetation with the help of a bony palate at the top of the mouth, since deer lack upper incisors. Small canines also aid in tearing vegetation with the incisors, while premolars and molars grind and chew plant matter. Because deer are highly selective, their digestive system is much smaller, less complex compared to other ruminants that consume mostly low-quality forages like grass. Ruminants are a type of ungulate that have a 4-chambered stomach. These 4 chambers, known as the rumen, reticulum, omasum, and abomasum, allow deer to efficiently digest plant matter, extracting the essential nutrients a deer needs to live. The ruminant digestive system also allows deer to eat a large amount of food quickly and then go hide in thick cover to bed down and digest it. This allows the deer to be exposed for a shorter period of time while eating and maximizing the amount of nutrition it gets from the plants it eats. But while deer are eating, they have to ensure they don't become food themselves for predators. With their large eyes being placed on the sides of their head, a deer can almost see completely around themselves. Any subtle movement caught by their vision will cause a deer to spring its head up, getting a better visual of a potential threat. If there ends up being no predator around, the deer will return to feeding but remain vigilant. Along with their vision, deer also rely on their sense of smell and hearing. Regardless, if a deer feels it's in danger, they can flee the scene running 35 to 40 miles per hour. The white-tailed deer is an animal that has become both familiar yet so unknown to many of us in the modern world. Their elusive nature can make it quite difficult to observe the daily life of these secretive animals despite living right in our own backyards. Yet now, as the deer population continues to grow, people are encountering deer far more often than they did 100 years ago, as a glimpse of these animals would be a rare occurrence. Thanks to the conservation efforts of state agencies, the white-tailed deer population was able to grow quickly, hailing it as one of the greatest conservation success stories of all time. Yet we can't just give credit to the hunters and state agencies for the deer's return, as the deer themselves should be given a substantial amount of credit too. Thanks to their highly adaptable nature to live in a variety of habitats, the diversity of plant matter, and reproduce quickly, the white-tailed deer was able to come back from the brink of extinction. Now, as deer have reclaimed much of their former range, they can be observed peacefully browsing, being the masters of the edge they were meant to be.